There we go. We're very pleased to have you here with us today. And I wanted to start today's event, as we always do, with a land acknowledgement. So if you'll join with me. This land, upon which the University of Denver now sits, is the ancestral homeland of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, whose loss we both recognize and mourn. Like the history of so many institutions in the Mountain West, ours is complex and sometimes painful. In recognition of this fact and to underscore our commitment to inclusion and equity, we commit to listen to and affirm the stories of all in our community. And we offer continued respect and support to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, as well as all other Native American communities throughout Colorado and the American West. Thank you. Today's program, as you may know, is sponsored by iRise, the Interdisciplinary Research Institute for the Study of Inequality. iRise features a number of postdoctoral fellows who work in research in the area of inequality and equality. And they have been significant in putting together the superintendent's visit to DU today, and I'd love to take this moment to thank all of our iRise participants for today's program. So thank you. iRise supports, in addition to the postdoctoral fellows who we sponsor, it supports faculty and students who are doing research really in an interdisciplinary fashion on issues of equity. And it is in many ways the first Knowledge Bridges program that we had here at the university. You may know that others have been more recently recognized, but iRise is far and away the first in bridging study of inequality and inequity across all of our academic disciplines and schools and colleges here at the university. And to share with us more about iRise, Professor Tom Romero of the law school is going to share with us a video that has been produced to, again, just embed us further in the iRise program. So if you'll go ahead with that. Thank you.
We're committed to supporting community-based organizations that are working towards social justice.
Creating healing justice initiatives that take the whole person in order to achieve social justice, in order to organize for social justice, in order to fight for social justice and win for social justice. You have to be able to show up to the fight as a whole person.
iRise simply is a hub to bring together the resources of the University of Denver to engage with community partners around some of the most intractable problems of racial injustice in our society. We had these multiple pandemics come together. Certainly the pandemic of COVID-19 and the biological pandemic, the pandemic of climate change, and of course the pandemic of racial violence and institutional racism. In terms of intersectionality, that means we need to understand not just race, but issues like gender, issues like poverty, issues like sexuality, issues like disability, in order for us to more precisely understand the nature of the issues. And then when it comes to interdisciplinary work, what this means is that we need a team of researchers, we need a team of collaborators that are able to look at these problems from a variety of different perspectives, a variety of different disciplinary backgrounds and trainings and methodologies, so we can collectively arrive at the right prescription, the right prognosis.
I get the sense when I speak to iRise faculty that they care about mentoring me in terms of my career and wanting to support me in whatever it is that I want to do. But also that they care about me as a human being, really cares about not just the ideology of racial justice, but the practice in how faculty and students and staff and postdocs treat each other is very important, because a lot of times I have experienced a disconnect between those two: what people study, what they read, what they research, and how they treat each other. And I think that if you want to really fight for racial justice, you actually have to do it all, instill care both in the institution and also in just interactions between everyday people.
The future of iRise, I think, is focused both short-term and long-term. One is we hope to continue to share the data that our faculty, our students, our community partners are continuing to collect in our variety of projects. To share that data and then begin to work with those that are in positions of power to begin to make meaningful, substantive change.
I think our primary blind spot is defensiveness and fear. And I think a lot of times people respond with defensiveness and fear of being accused of being biased, or fear that their environment is being accused of being biased, and people feel shame. But the aim of this type of research is not to make people feel shame or fear. The aim of this research is to make us better, to make our society better, and so that we could live with integrity, knowing that we are doing our best to approach justice in our environment.
And now we are going to turn to the main event. And I am very pleased to introduce our Superintendent of the Denver Public School System, Dr. Alex Romero, who will be sharing with us his vision today for the Denver Public School Systems. And I'll tell you more in a moment. Following Dr. Romero's introduction to his vision, we will also be learning more about the work of Dr. Maria Salazar, who is faculty in our Mortgage College of Education. Again, more on Dr. Salazar in a moment. And then we will have questions and conversation from the audience. So first, let me introduce the superintendent. Dr. Alex Romero is our new Denver Public School Superintendent. He began on July 6th. Of 2021. He leads with a vision of supporting students in the way that educators supported him when he was a student and growing up and into his career. He identifies as the child of a Cuban refugee and an immigrant from the Dominican Republic, and with that in mind, he has been honored as an outstanding administrator by the Latino Caucus of the Council of School Supervisors and Administrators, and inducted into the New York Academy of Public Education. He also received a Leadership and Excellence in Education Award from the Association of Dominican American Supervisors and Administrators, and was recognized as a Latino Administrator of the Year by the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. So we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Alex Romero.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Joining Dr. Romero is Dr. Maria del Carmen Salazar, professor in our Mortgage College of Education. Dr. Salazar may be known to many of you. Dr. Salazar teaches and researches and writes in the area of curriculum and instruction and in the area of teacher prep. She is a proud graduate of the Denver Public School System, is a first-generation college student and a Mexican immigrant, and speaks warmly of that in her experience informing her work today at DU. Wanted to share with you briefly some data on the Denver Public School System and DU, and then I will be turning the program over to Drs. Romero and Salazar. Here you'll see the distribution of students from the Denver Public School System who apply to DU in terms of their number of applications and those admitted, those matriculated over time. And what you'll find is that the applications have surely grown over time. The admits have held relatively steady, although an uptick in recent years, and then the yield has held relatively steady, and we'd love to increase that moving forward. And Dr. Romero and I over lunch spoke of some opportunities that we have to grow the number of Denver public school students here at DU. The next slide then shows the distribution of Denver public school students by race and ethnicity. And what you'll see is that Hispanic or Latinx students far outnumber all other racial and ethnic groups among the Denver public school students applying and enrolling here at DU. The next slide just highlights some of the partnerships that we already have in place between our schools and colleges and the Denver public school system. And just to highlight the schools that are most closely engaged with the Denver public school system are the Mortgage College of Education, of course, the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, and the Graduate School of Social Work. And a number of their faculty are deeply involved with research in the Denver public school system, and also providing supports, clinical, psychological, instructional, and other supports to the Denver public school system. The next slide shows us partnerships in particular related to STEM. And what you'll find is that there are two noteworthy programs: the Summer Institute, led by various DU science faculty to work with DPS teachers around curriculum and instruction in the sciences, and then STEM outreach connections that include a sci-tech camp and a health professions highway. The next slide, I'm sure Dr. Salazar can provide us with even more detail on, but it shows the teacher education prep program, which is a signature program of the Mortgage College of Education in partnership with the Denver public school system. And what you'll see over time is the number of students from our teacher education program who are now in the Denver public school system. You'll see the demographic distribution of these teachers and then what schools they are in. Last slide that I will highlight for you shows the performance reviews and the performance standards, satisfaction, and indeed, successes of our students in the teacher education program as they move into the Denver public school system. So without further ado, I would love to turn the floor over to Dr. Salazar and Dr. Romero. Dr. Salazar will be leading a conversation with the superintendent, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you both.
Thank you, Provost
Yes,
Clark.
my pleasure.
We appreciate it. And thank you for being here, Dr. Olson and Dr. Acevedo as well. We're so excited that you've been here with us all day. And I know we can talk forever, so I'm going to need somebody from iRise to signal us when it's time to stop. But would just love to start by jumping in around, share a little bit about your background, cultural, personal, professional. I've already heard you, some of your stories, and I've read about it. I see a lot of parallels to my own story growing up here in the Denver area. So jump right in.
Sure. Mic check, all good? Yes? Thank you. Thank you for, first of all, hosting us. And I want to highlight everybody who's here representing DPS. I know there's quite a bit of us. Yes? And as you mentioned, Deputy Superintendent Acevedo, but also Board President Olson. Thank you. It's been an incredible day, and I'm sure this is going to be as fruitful as everything else that we've engaged in. So there's so many ways that I can go into a personal story. So let me just start talking. How's that? All right, Doc? As you all heard from our provost, that a product, and I know that's interesting. I don't know. I am the son of a refugee father, Manuel Marrero, and the son of Mirta Altagracia del Carmen
Del Carmen.
Espinal. And why is that important? Because I've always known Mom as Mirta Gomez. All those other names went away. And although I can say it now proudly, because the statute of limitations are long gone and she's no longer with us, that Gomez last name came about so she can stay in the United States, right? So whatever she had to do to make sure that she had an opportunity for me and my brother to go through the educational system. I guess they're our version of the American dream. Dad wasn't really around. Um, I want to say great guy, but not focused on being a father, much less a husband. So more times out than in. Um, and interesting because I was able to really explore that. Right, heritage is important to me, so I went on journeys later on as a young adult, um, and ultimately ended up, reconnecting because of need. And I'll get to that hopefully in a moment. So grew up born in technically, right? So it's hard for me to say this. I want to say Bronx born and raised. Technically, that's not true because I was born in New York, Harlem, because something possessed my mom to say, okay, don't go to the hospital right next door, go to the one down in St. Luke's, which is on 110th. Um, and so I see a couple of folks there. So I'm a New Yorker, but right after that, straight to the Bronx, and definitely born and raised in the Bronx and Fordham Road. For those of us who may be familiar, really define my childhood and my young professional career. Um, Up and down, we would take leisurely strolls up Fordham Road, window shopping, which is a shopping center somewhat. We didn't buy a thing because we didn't have the means, but it was just a way for us to go up and down Fordham Road, which is easily a 2-mile walk east to west. It was on the west side of Fordham Road, which is a hop, skip away from Inwood, which is Washington Heights. So I had the Washington Heights and the Bronx, I guess, upbringing. Why is that important? Because Fordham Road really defined me in so many ways. It's a divide in the Bronx. North of Fordham Road is Kingsbridge and Riverdale, very affluent. When I say, I'm talking about generational wealth, like $10, $20 million cathedrals. They don't even call themselves the Bronx, it's Riverdale, New York. And then everything south of Fordham Road is our neighborhood, and everything that you might have seen that I hate to stereotype, but a lot of those stereotypes do apply in terms of what you see in the South Bronx and the Bronx being burnt when we were kids. So why is that important? Because that's how I guess, learned um, what it is to persevere. When I used to go into grade school, and my brother, who's 2 years older than me, I guess, had a reputation, right, of being, a little bit of a troubled young academic, brilliant, but not one to take well to authority, which is interesting because he ultimately became a militant. And I will always get, oh, that's Alexi, that's Manolito's little brother, right? So he can be good, right? Educators, yeah, I'm an educator, right? So I'm hoping that today maybe we can shift mindset. I'm hoping that we can shift mindset because I think, like Martin Luther King says, hate will not overcome hate. So, and I learned that the hard way. So educators also said he's on the other side of Fordham Road, so he can't amount to anything. These are educators who are supposed to save lives, who are really counting me out. Was too young and naive to realize that even many years later when I went to a school in Riverdale, when I manipulated my mother who didn't speak English, the beauty of being the translator when you're a kid, right? So you can say anything you want when it's time to reciprocate whatever professor or principal said, and you say, "Mom, todo bien." But I was able to really coerce my mother to go to this new school. Interesting enough, because here I am battling school choice. And I forced choice upon my mom by saying, the school that you want me to go to, where I tested into, where my brother went, a G&T program in the South Bronx, which was a middle school that he left to go to high school because I was incoming as grade 7. He was going into grade 9. I said, "Ma, you're going to send your youngest to the Pace Academy? You know where that is. It's tough there. It's a lot of drugs, a lot of violence." So I harped on my mom's willing to serve and protect and convince her to take me to Riverdale. And why is that important? Everything I promise is connected, right? Because I'm in a school, it's called the Riverdale Kingsbridge Academy. It still exists to this day, where I was with a group of students that I've never interacted with. My interactions have been with Miguel from upstairs and the other Manny that lived in the building. And I had a whole lot of folks who didn't look like me, right? Different religion, a lot of affluent Jewish neighborhood in Riverdale. And I did well, right? Because I was a good student. I was the opposite of my brother, meaning my brother would go against authority, and I would always be, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. So I did well, but after that first year, they shipped me out to an academy, which was really just a basement that was rented out in Kingsbridge, which is a little bit southern than Riverdale. And we didn't have any licensed teachers there. It was a whole lot of fun. I didn't learn a thing, and we regressed tremendously. And I learned after the fact, I want to say that is possibly because of the zip code. It could have been because of what we look like. I hope that's not the case, because then that's explicit. But everybody in there was brown and black. Quite frankly, look how fair skinned I am. I was the lightest person in that little academy. So why is that important? Years later, I find out that it was a community movement to ship those who didn't live in that area, and a $80 million crystal marble floor building was created down below so we can go there, right? They were willing to lobby to create a school. And I ended up, that's where I started my K-12 career, right? Because I had a principal put in perspective to me saying, oh my God, you're the reason this building exists. So back to Fordham Road, I remember being humiliated by mom while we were forced to really sell Avon in the streets of Fordham Road on the Sears building, facing what turned out to be Fordham University, where I ultimately ended up enrolling as an undergrad. 4 for 10 with a magic phrase that my brother and I convinced mom to just say randomly, which is for the order of $10. And we used to escape and go and play stickball, rock ball, because there was no baseballs, and to this little oasis of ours. Fast forward many years later, I'm in this building that I'm not supposed to go into, where we used to sell the Avon to those, customers, which is the headquarters of the Bronx Region Department of Education. And the superintendent says, I have a building for you, which I think what you bring to the table and your background can help save the school. And she pointed out a school that didn't exist when I was a kid. And it was exactly where the foundation was, where we used to escape. So incredible opportunity. I very blindly said, yes, I'll do it, uh, because I felt like it was divine intervention. I would have asked a whole lot of questions now, because what I signed up for was no easy task. 10 years, the school was really, really, really plummeting, and it was about to close, and the principal was removed and forced to stay there as the assistant principal. So imagine me taking over a school. I had a big target on my back. Skipping all those hardships, I was able to not only to develop as a leader, really know what it is to manage complex change, um, but really, really transform my leadership. An incredible experience there. So everything tied to Fordham Road until someone was able to kick me and saying, the good work that you're doing in your community, there are a lot of other Alexitos and Marias outside of the scope of this street. And then I expanded to the state and went to, quite frankly, the most difficult district that I think exists in the nation, East Ramapo Central School District. When we talk inequities and racial conflict, there's nothing that competes with that. Please Google it and you'll see what I'm referring to. And that was the ultimate litmus test. And when I was able to bridge those relationships and establish bridges at that district, then ready to take on the superintendency. And if it wasn't for those who are sitting in the seat and the largest systems that you can imagine, whether it's Clark County, Chicago, or New York City itself, I would have never even thought of leaving New York. So took one application and one click of a button and feeling unappreciated by a community that I was giving my all to at no increase, meaning I was there sitting as a superintendent and someone was getting easily $100,000 more for doing a horrible job, quite frankly. And here I am doing what everybody was saying was an exceptional job, but not getting what I deserve, right? So that was one indication, and also being unappreciated. And I said, you know what? Enough of this. And I said, click on the button, because I had it ready and it was just sitting on my desktop. And the best decision I ever made, right? Because I have to give credit to the Board of Education. They had so many options. Denver is an incredibly desirable district on the national scale, and I know it was a who's who applied. And I'm thrilled that I'm here, right? Because I do think that it's purposeful, just like that Fordham University story that I didn't share, but hopefully I'll get a moment to, that school that I ended up leading, and that school that was created because of folks like me. And I think this is also part of that story, that this was supposed to happen. Because what I bring to the table is no bias. I have no skin in the game. No one can qualify me as a reformer, as a traditionalist. I have an experience on that school that had no resources, and I turned it around. So no one can tell me that the answer is to close a school, because I was able to do it with zero support and zero philanthropic buyouts, and whether it's autonomy or or however we want to classify it, because sometimes innovation in our system gets really misnamed. So that's a little bit of my history mixed with my professional background. In terms of my current role, superintendent, I guess in year 2 now, technically. But when I say technically, I really feel like it's year 10. Let me explain. I was superintendent in New Rochelle School District, where we had the first case of COVID in March of 2018. Now, so that was a dog year superintendency, and it's been the great resignation across school districts, meaning the best of the best aren't making it through. And not only was I able to survive, that's what also gave me, el ánimo to click that button and say submit to the application, because while I see those who I've admired fall, and here I am not only persevering, but re-engaging, pushing back on the governor who wants to close the school, and ultimately leading the charge of bringing in-person instruction back. So, and before that, assistant superintendent in East Ramapo Central School District. Please Google it, right? Because if we're going to speak about inequities, until what we have to solve here is still going to be difficult, but it's very much achievable when you see what other folks are dealing with, right? So just to put it in perspective. And before that, principal, and one of my best, I guess, attributes is how I started in K-12. My career started in higher ed. So Dr. Salazar, I'm down. Provost, I'm down, right, with the higher ed importance and how it molded saving lives in financial aid and admissions. Then I went into counseling, in which I was able to save lives just like good folks saved my life. And that has really proven invaluable as a leader in any capacity, whether it's principalship or superintendent, because yes, we're all teachers. A lot of us have done a whole lot of adjunct work, and I don't think anybody can question on how we deliver, whether it's instruction or teachable moments. I do it often as a superintendent. But being able to connect with folks, even if they have opposing views, is I think what makes or breaks the success of someone in the position of influence. So I'll stop there, right? And maybe I'll tell the welfare story that I skipped over, which is a very, very important part of my journey.
That's a really powerful story that I heard you
Yeah.
tell this morning, so definitely want you to share that. I hear a lot of parallels in your story, and we talked a little bit about this, you being of Dominican and Cuban descent. I'm of Mexican descent, and yet there's so many parallels in our stories. I was born in Mexico, in Tlaltenango de Sanchez Roman, Zacatecas. My parents have a 3rd and a 6th grade education, and they came to the US, to Denver actually, and they crossed me across the border when I was only 2 weeks old. And so I grew up in the Denver area on the north side, what whiteification is now calling the Lower Highlands.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even know where that was when somebody told me to meet them in Lodi, and it was 3 blocks from the home I grew up in. My parents are still there. I'm a product of the Denver Public Schools. I went to Bryant Webster, Gus Skinner, and I graduated from North High School. And what I often tell people is I succeeded despite my education. And that's one of the stories that I want to tell today about that experience. My early years were very tumultuous, very complicated. My little brother drowned in a well. We were playing hide and go seek in Mexico. And we think apparently he tried to hide inside the well. And that caused incredible trauma in my home. And that caused then domestic violence in my home between my mother and my father and my brother and my father. And I actually write about this in a book on teacher evaluation because it formed who I am. Tupac Shakur talks about the rose in the concrete. I am the rose that grew from concrete, but the concrete is a part of me and it's not something I want to leave behind. It made me who I am. And so bringing that into the Denver public schools was extremely difficult because no one talked about it. My parents didn't talk about it, and my teachers didn't talk about it, and I didn't understand what death meant until I was about 10 years old. Now, I want to share my experience with you in the Denver public schools because it was such a formative experience that led me into being a teacher and led me into being a teacher educator. I went to kindergarten with all my treasures, and they were in my mochila, my backpack, and they were beautiful treasures. They were my Spanish language and my Mexican culture and my parents and my siblings and all of my extended family. And Mr. Lopez thought my treasures were beautiful in my bilingual kindergarten classroom, and he wanted me to bring those treasures into the classroom. And he thought I was so smart that I could learn in 2 languages. However, I was mainstreamed in the first grade and to a sink or swim opportunity, right? And it wasn't even an opportunity, it was enforced. Miss Kowalski's classroom, she gave me the message that my mochila, my backpack, and my beautiful treasures were not welcome in her classroom. And she never had to say a word. She taught me this through her curriculum, her instruction, what was on the walls of her classroom. And so I got the message pretty clearly that there was something wrong with that old mochila, and I needed the new mochila that would give me the English language, that would give me the US culture and US ways of knowing. So I didn't want that old mochila. Those treasures, they weren't shiny anymore. I wanted those new treasures. So I worked really, really hard in the third grade to get into the top reading group, the Red Robins, because I figured out in third grade that the way to become smart and to become worthy was to become white, and that the color of my skin would change if I got into the highest literacy group. Because the few white students in my class were in the top literacy group, and they were favored by my teacher. So I worked really, really hard, and I got into that top reading group, and my teacher called my name, and I got this little ribbon, and I thought the color of my skin would change right there on the spot. And then I went home and felt completely demoralized that I would have to live in my dark skin forever. And that was my experience in the Denver public schools. It was about losing what I came with, and it was about feeling shame about what I brought with me and those treasures. And I finally hit this sense of anger in high school when I had a Spanish teacher who saw value in my treasures and told me to get them back, not to let them go. And so that was at the point at which I started to learn about my own culture and my own language, right? It was these 5 teachers in the Denver public schools, my entire experience, who held high expectations for me. The others had the pobrecito syndrome. Let me lower the bar so you can step over it. You poor little one, you're lucky to make it out of high school. And so having that experience then coming into college was so hard. My dad, when I told him I wanted to go to college, he said, ¿Qué estás loca, hija? He says, are you crazy, daughter? He grew up in poverty, and so to him, his idea of success was getting a job and making money. So I had to navigate the higher education system without knowing not one person in my entire family, extended family, or community who had gone to college. And I waited for those professors to give me back my treasures. But they wielded the Western canon like a weapon that would keep America great. They weren't going to give me back those treasures. And so I had to regain and learn about my own culture and my history and my ways of knowing and regain those. And that's what led me into teaching. I became a teacher in DPS and then Jefferson County, a history teacher, because I wanted to challenge the master narrative around our accomplishments and around our history and contributions. And then I got my doctorate because I saw a Latina who had a doctorate, and I thought, hey, if she can do that, I can do that. And so that brought me into the University of Denver. I've been here 18 years now, one of 5 full professors on the entire University of Denver campus. Yes.
Awesome.
And first in my college, woman of color to get tenure and full professor as well. And mind you, we've been around since the late 1800s. So I can definitely identify with your experiences around just struggle, right? Yeah. Struggle.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share that welfare story,
Yeah,
but also
sure.
your experience in schools. I heard you talk about a story this morning as well.
Yeah, so I'll try to hit both bullets if that's okay in terms of the educational experience. But also, I'm very pragmatic, so let me use what you just mentioned and your background and what I was hopping around in terms of my story as well, and how I was, I guess, greeted, not the best greeting, right? Board aside, very supportive. Hair was in New York, shadow boxing in my living room, right? No, really, really worked up because I'm getting messages that there's certain groups who want the search redone, and Romero's are not the one. And I see some folks who were very supportive, and thank you, right? Saying not only was the search the right one, it had 3 great candidates, BIPOC candidates. So I personalized it for like 20 minutes. I'm like, oh, no, the New Yorker came out of me, right? Saying, oh, wait till I see them. And then I realized very quickly that it had nothing to do with little Alexito. They didn't know that person, much less Dr. Romero. It's something is the matter here, whether it's the system, perhaps it's the board, and I need to just get to the bottom of it so I can be successful. So hearing what you're saying, right, I wish that folks can I guess, be a little bit more open, right? Because who are we to judge anybody's upbringing, right? And even someone who perhaps has had privilege. No, some of my mentors, yes, they've covered the gamut: Chicano, Mexican American, of course, Dominican American, but some of them are, no, Dr. Fitzpatrick, the Rose Fairweather Clooney's of the world. These names don't ring a bell to you, but there's folks who definitely didn't have Maria or Alex's experience, but they were able to see that now they have a duty to serve and to support others, right? So I was able to come with an open mind. So if I can tell that story very quickly, July 4th, I'm driving in with a U-Haul, and I see fireworks, so I knew I was getting close to Denver. I stayed the night somewhere. I guess it was Kansas. All I saw was cows. And the next morning, I parked the U-Haul in the Highlands area. And I approached one of those folks, right? And I said, well, we have to talk, right? Because you don't know me. You put something in writing, you signed off on a letter, and I don't appreciate it, and I just really need to understand the why. That very quickly led into another meeting in which I said the following, maybe not verbatim, but I said, a little bit of my story, and I know that I've done the research. I know the Corky Gonzalez story. I know about the West blowouts, and I'm in no position to compare yours to mine. All I know is I'm so thrilled that you're here to tell it, and incredible that you have overcome. And I can share some as well, but I'm not here to compare. But what I can say is that never in a million years did I expect anyone, especially someone who identifies as a Latino or a Latina, to put up a roadblock. Because here I am serving the students at DPS, and I would never in a million years do that to one of your sons or daughters, and those are my students. And quite frankly, you did it to me, because I am a son of you, meaning I've read your mission statement, and I read their mission statements, whether it's at Vicios. I read Padre's mission statement. I read them all, and I said, what you guys are aiming to do, look at the output right here. I'm the output of what you're trying so hard to accomplish. And a roadblock, although I'm going to forgive, it's going to be hard to forget it, right? Because it's going to be another lesson learned. So very thankful that you shared that story, because I had to do that in reverse. And I do have his permission to say it, Richard Carranza. If it wasn't for, then I'm gonna have to take credit for it. My intervention with the Dominican American organization that our provost mentioned, that ultimately gave me an incredible honor and award before I left, that I had to go down there and speak my Dominicano Spanish, and dejen el relajo. Es un Latino igual que nosotros, which means cut it out. He is here for our students, and yes, he is not Dominican, but what is the problem, right? Let's support him, and let's make sure he has an opportunity to succeed. So it was reciprocated when I came on board. Back to Fordham Road. So what I neglected to mention was, across the street was this oasis that I had never stepped into, which is Fordham University. And I was, again, a great student, so I had a great, incredible opportunity to go to several universities, all local and some abroad, from the UPenns to the NYUs and the Binghamtons. And Fordham captivated me because it had Fordham in the title, right? And I didn't believe that in the concrete jungle that I was raised, that this existed. When I walked in here, very similar experience. What an incredible campus we have, and how captivating it was for someone who has walked, again, on multiple days, many miles, crossing in, never knowing that those cathedrals were actually a place that you can actually, develop yourself. So I said yes, and I enrolled, and shortly after that, I lost my mother. So even, again, things happening for a reason, right? That's the only person I had in my life at the moment. My brother was off to the military, he was abroad. And I can only imagine what would have happened to my life if I was in another state, right? The fact that I can walk to and from, did I get the absolute experience of being an undergrad? Absolutely not, right? I was in my North Faces and baggy clothes where everybody was in chancletas going to school, which I never understood, right? And I realized it's because they'd have a short drive, a short walk to their class, where I had to either walk those 2 miles or get on the 12 bus. And I remember the first time that I guess, went against authority. Remember, I'm the good kid, the good, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And it's because when I came back from DR, where we ultimately started, where we buried Mom, I tried to figure out what was gonna happen. right? So we've always had rental situations, meaning even if it was a 1-bedroom or when we really living large, we had a 2-bedroom, it was always really a studio because we had all rooms rented out to make ends meet. And now that fell on me, right? So talk about financial literacy. I had to be a man like that. So cut out of class, meaning the first time ever, cut out of class, went down to the South Bronx on Brook Avenue, 3rd Ave, and I went to the welfare line. And I can't wait to tell this story. Hopefully I never have to for my little ones, no, because now I'm overcompensating as a dad, right, for everything that I didn't have. So I can put in perspective on what it means not to have. And you'll see this picture, and I have it, my wife hasn't even seen this, she doesn't know this story. And you see someone, and I promise you, I had long hair, right? Long hair was covering my eyes, all disheveled, the shaggy beard, the eyes in the back of my head. No, really, really looking awful, skinny as can be. And that's a picture that's memorialized, really, really capturing a moment in my life that really transformed my leadership style. How so? Because I'm sitting in a room with folks who are also down on their luck. So I'm definitely not judging. I'm just wondering if this is going to be my destiny. Next to me is someone who reeks of alcohol, who's missing teeth, definitely struggling with abuse. To the right of me is someone who is expecting possibly their 8th child because everybody, all the other kids were running around in the room. So I'm saying, okay, down on their luck, down on their luck, down on their luck, right? No, I belong here. And the first time that I guess disobeyed authority was when I walked up and I tried to explain to another civil servant, meaning a public worker, just like we are. And I said, I have this incredible opportunity. I had a great first semester. No, I go to Fordham University. Of course you know what it is. It's, just take the train north. And she says, sit down, sir, take this test. Take the test, basic arithmetic, 2 seconds, finished it, and I see the folks struggling. I felt awful. I gave this guy little answers, I admit it. And I went up and I said, okay, this can't be me. I did this in grade school. I said, I don't know what you're thinking, but you can forget about your dreams about this university that I don't know about. You sit here, and if you're lucky, we'll place you in a place where you can start making some wages. So I waited that day because that first day is when they end the day giving you emergency coupons, 60 coupons, actual ones. No, the ones that look like stamps. And I took those and I said, you're never gonna see me again, right? So, and 2 things that really transform on how I work as an individual and now as a professional. I had the courage to, 1, disclose what I was dealing with to the educators who quite frankly saved my life. The doctors, the Dr. Bishwas and the Dr. Mukherjees and folks who I just looked at as if they're the sages that I don't have access to, who said, no, you're not going anywhere. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure you graduate. And ultimately realizing that I needed help and called the old man, who was out and about, having a whole lot of fun, have some half brothers I'm sure that exist out in the Bronx. And I said, okay, mom is gone. We have to figure this out together. So, those 2 things really transformed how I shifted from a business student at that time to someone who's going to pursue education. And from there, went into graduate school to be a counselor so I can save a life just like my life was saved. And I was given the opportunity to do that within the first couple of weeks. And that's when the spontaneous but strategic person developed in me, meaning a little bit of a rebel rouser and break a couple rules when it's necessary. First week on the job, while I was pursuing my degree, I had a young man who came in tears and said, my dad passed and I don't know what I'm gonna do. And I just broke every rule and all protocol and went straight to the head of financial aid saying, well, I have access to the system. There's $40,000 that exists in this pot and divided by 4 is 10 each, and here's who you need to give it to. And that was the first. Anthony Di Benedetto, who I don't know where he is, but I know that hopefully if he stayed the course, he graduated with a degree. And I've been doing that ever since, right? First, when I was doing Intimately, getting a student from the projects to Harvard, right, which it is possible. And as a school leader, and now I'm looking to do it in the millions, which is possible, right? Because for every 90,000 student that crosses our school system, we can have possibly 90,000 guardians, if not, 180. And when you magnify that by a couple years of hard work, we're transforming millions of lives.
I love how you talk about saving lives. I often talk to our teacher education students about the power they have in their hands, right? That they are not only changing the lives of the student in front of them, but they are changing their children's lives and their children's lives. So those 5 teachers in DPS changed my life and my children's lives and their children's lives. When you think back on your time and your stories you've shared with us, what are you most proud of as an educator and a leader at this point?
Without a doubt, is one story. So this is when I was a principal. And I am finishing up SLT, which school leadership team meeting, in which the concept didn't exist in the community where I was leading, meaning they didn't know that it had access. And I remember parents, and we had a lot of Cotorianos and Central American parents in that neighborhood, which used to be the Little Italy section of the Bronx, not so much Little Italy anymore in terms of the makeup and demographics, saying that they felt, and this also came into my research, right? I ended up really studying as a doctoral student myself on why I was able to go this way, and so many were able to, well, became a statistic. And what I realized in my findings, and also it proved to be true in practice, was we have parents who see a school building, and I'm not talking about this incredible infrastructure that we're sitting in and what we saw today. Even the most rundown building is a cathedral to them. Right? I heard it from their mouth saying, well, we went to school, we used to do basic math, sometimes in the dirt and the sand. And maybe at midday, you get to go home, and perhaps you can come back the next day, and middle school is usually where you cap out at. So to put it in perspective, a lot of parents felt like they didn't have access to the school system. And outside of running this incredible district is a lot of the research that I'm engaged in terms of really shifting the concept of community involvement to engagement to empowerment, right? It's a major, major leap in each one of those tiers, because some feel like they don't have access. And here I am establishing that as part of the fabric of how I lead the school, and I have an incredible group of parents who are finally motivated and feel like they have decision-making power. Took a while to get them there. And I'm excited, and it's a Friday evening, because something possessed us to have these meetings on Friday nights. And we finished the meeting, 2-hour meeting, great meeting. And I had Guadalupe, this parent, she was, I believe, could have been from El Salvador. And she just became the treasurer of the organization, our organization, which is just a school. And she followed me back to the office. And I have to admit, I was like, oh, please, not now. I want to go home. I just had my daughter, right? And I was far away from where I worked. And she's just sitting there. And I'm being really rude, actually. I'm sitting and finishing up the meeting notes and trying to make sure that I don't lose a step for the next engagement. And she's just staring, a very awkward stare right here. And I said, Guadalupe, ¿qué pasa? And she says the following, and this is what the pivotal moment was. She said, estoy contento. And I said, which means she's thrilled, she's happy. And I said, me too, great meeting. All right? And no, it had nothing to do with the meeting. And she said, estoy contento porque yo sé que ahora mi hijo, Antonio, tiene la posibilidad de hacer como tú, Doctor Marrero, o mejor. And my heart dropped, because first of all, I felt so awful. I was translating the moment because I was being so rude and inconsiderate. And what she said was, I'm thrilled that my son has the opportunity to be like you, and then she threw in the or better, right? Which I love that part. And why that was important, because I knew her story and her sacrifice, that she was illegally here, and ultimately, unfortunately, she was brought back to her native country, and then Anthony, thank the Lord, was still in our system. But she knew right then and there that she did the same sacrifice that Mirta Gomez, who's really Mirta del Carmen Espinal, my mom, did. And that's the ultimate sacrifice. And what I was able to take away was, okay, we're doing this for a purpose. And I had to reflect the nuances of the work can't get in the way of these moments. Because that proved to me that everything that we've been doing is worthwhile, because that's another way that we are saving lives and transforming lives. Because even though that she was deported and ultimately she passed away, Antonio was in a neighboring school which he matriculated into high school, and ultimately, has a life ahead of him here in the United States. So absent of his mom, just like little Alexi, but put it in perspective in terms of how impactful our work is.
I'm definitely going to keep that saying with me, like you or better, right? I love that. I want to share with you some of the things I'm proud of, and it's really around the impact around the Denver Public Schools, right? To be able to give back. A lot of these things don't count for promotion and tenure at the university, but it's my work on teacher evaluation in the district. It's my work on your transition team as well, helping to identify priorities. But it's also the Freedom School, and I want to be able to share with you some of the work we're doing, because half of the families that are served in the Freedom School are in the Denver Public Schools. So would love to go ahead and show the video, but the Freedom School is an enrichment program, and it's actually offered twice a month, and it's made for Black, Brown, and Indigenous families. And half of the students that we're serving in the Freedom School are in the Denver Public Schools. Our mission is around racial education and healing justice. I would love for you to see a little bit about the Freedom School. Right now, we are envisioning it and launching it as a community-based program, but we want to put it inside the Denver Public Schools as well. Helping our children learn to love themselves, learn to love the color of their skin, their hair, learn to understand their rich history. We don't need to be fixed, changed, or saved. The answers are within our own communities.
Freedom School is an initiative that we started a couple of years back in conjunction with iRise, Dr. Maria Salazar, and Cassandra, and a group of community organizers and activists who were looking to take control of our educational outcomes by supplementing what our children and what our parents were learning by infusing it with cultural relevancy and political education. It's an ever-growing and organic process with Freedom Schools. That's the way that they're supposed to be, right? So Freedom Schools really are about meeting the needs of the people wherever the people are at any particular point in time. It's not built in the westernized education model that it's cookie cutter and people are just basically children on an assembly line getting stamped and things poured into their head and then moved on to the next grade. The Righteous Rage Institute has a social aspect to it, but it also has a healing aspect to it, where we really focus on creating healing justice initiatives that take the whole person. One of the things that I began to understand is being involved inside of America in this environment has a certain level of toxins involved in it. Being a community organizer has a certain level of stress involved with it. And if you don't have healthy ways and means to transfer that energy, if you don't have healthy ways and means of how to eat, what to drink, how to exercise, then what happens is those toxins will get caught inside of the body, and those toxins turn into illness. Some of them can be deadly, especially for Black, Indigenous people, but our working class white brothers and sisters as well. In order to achieve social justice, in order to organize for social justice, in order to fight for social justice and win for social justice, you have to be able to show up to the fight as a whole person. Lest what you will end up doing is, because of the toxins, because you haven't detoxed yourself from living in the West, you will simply replicate the same systems of your oppressor. So detoxifying the body, mind, and spirit is a key component to the Righteous Rage Institute and the work that we do out in the community.
happening in the Denver public schools, because we felt there was not, this wasn't present, this focus on racial and healing and education justice. Also want to acknowledge Dr. Will Anderson in the room, who actually is the creator of the curriculum for the Freedom School. So thank you so much for all of your contributions. Was really proud to see that the Board of Education and DPS has developed some end statements that really very much align with what we're doing in the Freedom School around racial justice, education justice. The district is also really moving toward healing justice, right, around mental health. Children and families are asking for that, in particular during and after the pandemic. So love just to share this example for you. We developed it as a disruptor in the Denver public schools, and now we're seeing that there's an alignment, that we're moving in the same direction. Would love to hear about your vision for DPS and how that is also inclusive of the board's end statements, or I think that's what they're called, is that
Yes,
correct?
that's what
End
they're called.
statements around racial justice, education justice, and healing justice. What's your vision for the district?
Thank you, thank you. And I love how you said disruptor, because I think as I was being introduced and announced, I was getting a whole lot of labels, and some of them just simply didn't fit. That was one of the common ones, and I'm not going to say that that's too far off from the truth. I think that we do need to disrupt the system, right? I believe in the implementation dip and also how things flourish, whether it's what happened in certain sectors of our population, regions, or schools. But clearly things have at least plateaued, right? And some have really dipped down. But one label that I guess that I have to own, which is really linked to my vision, is unifier. And that was said repeatedly during the first days of my arrival. I do believe that this district is divided in many ways, right? Some of the obvious when it comes to the racial tensions, whether it's implicit or explicit. I can give stories on my listening learning tour. I experienced both, right? An incredible session in which it was so lovely and most beautiful little old lady, right? Said all the right things publicly, but then slipped something right in here. And if it wasn't for the pocket squares that I wear, I would have never remembered. And all I see is hate, right? So that's someone who was, afraid to speak out. And then you have the more explicit ones who will put it in their signature in an email saying, Dr. Romero, why are you cutting a video about Black excellence? That's why your kids can't read or write, because you want to teach them about Black history. And with their signature in bold, meaning, no, they want to call. So those two extreme, but in terms of unification, I do believe that this district will become the best district in the nation once we can really stop pointing the finger, which is the easiest thing to do in the world. One of my sayings is it takes no effort to say, Ms. Bob, you messed up. Dr. Salazar, here's what you need to improve. The hardest thing to do, I believe, is to turn that finger around and say, what could I have done better, right? True reflection. I think everybody in this district needs to do it. And I think I'm the person that can ask for that because, again, I have no skin in the race. I have no alliance. I'm absolutely neutral. But there's clearly some divides, whether it's the charter versus the traditional, reform versus neighborhood school, whether it's public school servant versus the police department. I can go on and painting pictures of how there's tremendous tension within the district. So my vision and my output and my outcome would be to unify this district somehow. I think that we can have a harmonious relationship and a true ecosystem in which every student has the opportunity to engage in whatever school or system, and we can provide the supports needed. And I don't think that's pie in the sky at all. That is why, I guess, quite frankly, the vision at the moment. In terms of the more practical is the work. If I can embarrass you a little bit in terms of how grateful I am and honored that Dr. Salazar, along with Dr. Allen and Dr. Ron Cabrera, are engaging in the phase 2 of my entry plan, which is the transition team, in which they're taking a tremendous amount of data and developing priorities. So those are going to be the anchors, which will really define the strategic plan for this district, but also provide the board, hopefully, with those end statements for the X amount of years. Meaning, if we build this plan the way that I'm thinking, it will address the inequities. Everything that I have experienced superficially as I engage with crowds, you can't ignore the data, right? You can't ignore the feedback that you hear from those who I've engaged with. So those priorities will be the foundation for a multi-year strategic plan. So even if it's 5 years down the road, the beauty of that is that my goals, thank goodness for the board to adopt a true policy governance model, that it's going to be predetermined and prescripted in terms of what we're all fighting towards. And the cheat code of superintendency, as I mentioned to your Richie director, is in terms of decision making. I think we all know this. You can't make the wrong decision if the decision is in the best interest of students, right? Cheat code number one. And when it comes to the macro system, it really has to do with making sure that you are serving the community. And if your plan and your goals and statements are tied to the voice of the community, that's cheat code number two. Meaning you can't mess up if this is what you gathered from the folks, because there's no longer anyone coming from the outside imposing their facts. As we heard earlier, there's no such thing as cookie cutter, because if that's the case, then we wouldn't have the issues that we have. So my vision is to unify the district, and the means is the work that you're helping me with in establishing those priorities so we can embed them in a strategic plan. In terms of some issues that I see with the strategic plan right on from the onset is what you just described in terms of your experience when you came back home in Denver, in the low Highlands area. I would love more than anything to have a 10-year strategic plan. Little unrealistic. 5-year is common, makes a little sense, but I don't see how we can go beyond 3 years. Who really knows in the crowd what Denver is going to look like in 3 years? Because I can't. I'm trying to establish roots here, and I don't know where to call home in terms of a neighborhood, because it's changing tremendously. So even if it's a 3-year, we'll go right back at it, and I hope that I have the commitment of DU and everybody else who I'm collaborating with, so we can just make sure that we are keeping a pulse on the needs of the community and pose those two cheat codes again, right? Using the community voice and their wants and desires as a deliverable. The board to charge me with implementing it and the strategy, and making sure that every decision is in the best interest of students. I'll stop there. I can go a lot deeper into the DPS in terms of core values and everything about students first and equity, but I'll let you pose another question if you have one.
Thank you. I think we'll end with this question around, you've spent the day with us. You've learned a lot about the university, the faculty, our students, our alumni. What do you see as some possible opportunities to partner so that we can support this, the upcoming strategic plan and the board's end statements?
Oh, so many. From the group that I just met with, the researchers, and how we can use our researchers, your experts, to inform us, right? Instead of me tasking the internal folks who may have their bias, right? Especially if they've been under a certain regime and ideology, or costing the district taxpayer money by outsourcing it. So in terms of symbiotic relationships, there's so many opportunities. That's an entry point. If we can say, okay, here's a priority. Actually, here's what I'm thinking. So don't be surprised Friday when we meet when I say the following. I think that once the transition team grapples a bit more with theirs, we have the priorities as a deliverable, but also research questions. So I can bring it right back to the researchers here in DU and saying, here's what our needs are. Go ahead, you have approval. IRB, clear. So you can go ahead and research, because that's another way so we can inform our practice. And I promise that I'm not concerned about anybody taking that and saying, look what DPS is not doing. I believe in showing and being as explicit as we can, so we can really shift out of the rut. That's one. In terms of the teacher pipeline and really professional pipeline, I got an opportunity to get a tour today and also meet in an intimate session with some of your students, our former students. And I see that there's a tremendous need for us to really develop, an articulation in how we can diversify the DU student body, but also create a pipeline for our students to matriculate, get the support they need, true wraparound services, starting with assistance for that tuition, which, yikes, but making sure that the academic supports and everything else is there as well so they can be successful. And then here's how we can really end and close that circle in terms of how it can be reciprocal and symbiotic, that we have a tremendous need. All districts are struggling in terms of manpower, staff, and whether it's teachers, whether it's social workers, whether it's our school of law. I have general counsels that support the decisions that we make, and leadership, of course. So we can have that circle in which, if they want to go and take over the world and go off into business, terrific. If they want to go into international studies, terrific. If they follow in their passion, great. But I can guarantee you that in our system, right, in the business of education, there's an opportunity for DU graduates to come back and serve the students. So that's one that I'm very interested in. And I see the provost there was one that really, really sparked my interest, but I don't know how confidential it was over lunch, that really has me so excited on something that I've been really trying to do on my own, on the few moments that I get on a weekend, to try to come up with a way that we can really maintain our system afloat in terms of our professionals, but also meet the growing needs of our students. And really has to do with international outreach and saving lives internationally, right? Given the opportunity for an international teacher to come on board to DPS. And one of the major issues there is, where are they going to get their degree? Boom, right here, potentially, but also how we're going to support their basic needs in terms of housing. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. There was something shared with me that I saw as an incredible opportunity in which we can solve all those issues and create a situation in which we'll save a life as a professional, and then that person can do the same thing that many of us are doing, impacting lives. That's 4 examples. There's so many, but I can't stress enough in terms of how excited I am to really articulate the great work that's happening here, and really elevating the voice of those students who are with us, and having more students come visit the campus through the VIP program, so they can have the same impact that the students that you have now have had, and are, I would say, responsible for their visit and ultimate enrollment here. And what happened to me when I stumbled upon the incredible greenery that was Fordham University. And there was not a system designed for that. It just happened for a reason. But if we can force fate, I have no problem in trying to create fate, right? Especially if it's with the right intent. But that's just a few. There's so much going through my mind in terms of how we can really collaborate.
Well, we've been so grateful that you've spent the entire day with us, and as well as the 2 of you. Thank you so much for being here. We want to thank you all as well, and we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. So if we can, we'll transition as well and get some questions in.
Wonderful. Well, we've encouraged you all to either pre-submit questions or to go onto this link here and ask questions. And it'll be my role to actually go back and forth to do this. So we already have a couple of questions that were pre-submitted and also that were done through the Padlet. And I want to actually, this is a question for both of you, to actually build upon this last point, right? This a partnership between DPS and DU, public schools and higher education more generally. From each of your perspectives, part of that connection and that partnership, right, is particularly higher education being prepared to deal with a diverse student body that has a whole bunch of needs. And so what do each of you see that higher education needs to do more generally, or DU more specifically, to better prepare ourselves to have your students come into our institutions?
You heard from some of the DPS graduates today,
Yeah,
right? What were some themes that stood out to you there?
Access, for sure, right? So in terms of, well, I think, Dr. Romero, your question in terms of our professional staff being prepared to welcome our students, yes?
Well, actually, as you're looking at us at DU, right, or Fordham, for instance, right? What do we need to do, right, to better prepare ourselves to meet the needs of the students that you're going to be graduating and sending to places like DU, Fordham, University of Colorado, and those sorts of places?
Yeah, great question. That did come up with our students. I think it really needs to be surrounded around bridging that gap physically, right? Bridging that gap. So there's still a disconnect. A lot of students DPS students are familiar with Denver in its entirety, especially this institution, because they drive by it, right? We heard it today in terms of they know the, what is it, the nice gold tower that you guys have, right, by I-25, is it? Remember, I'm new here, right? So, so they're familiar with it, but they're not familiar with what you all have in store. No pun intended. So access for our students, but at the same time are your educators, right? In terms of bridging that connection. So whether it's more school visits, so they can see what our students are engaged in, but also to see their environment. So just as much as our students need access to the campus so they can get inspired and explore, I think your staff also needs to come and see what's happening in our school building beyond those who are required to, meaning those who have student teachers that they have to go observe and practicum evaluators. So that access, and I think an opportunity is that just like if you have shared space with us, which we're very grateful, we're doing the same through our transition team work, and there's so many ways that you can come and connect with our students. That's the best way. I model that in how I lead. So I visit 4 schools on average a week, and one of them is with the entire cabinet to make sure that even in our system, some who can easily get displaced and stuck in their office or cubicle, they can realize how important it is to see and visit their end product. It doesn't matter in what capacity. Even if the chief operating officer, if you see the drop ceiling that has some water stains, that's not acceptable. You'll be okay if you are in that or your son or daughter. And HR as well. That's the Maria Salazar that you approved tenure for, and look how she's doing. So we do it on an intimate basis, right? Because we can get disconnected, and I think our systems are already separate, clearly, right? Because we're different organizations. So I think we need to bridge that gap, both students and also staff, from top down and up down.
I think the students we talked to today, the DPS graduates who are here at DU, also talked about how important the access programs are here. Even just around the corner, we have our affinity groups and we have our access programs, and they talked about loving that space. As I was walking into the building, I saw many of them in that space, and they talked about that feeling like home for them. So those access and pipeline programs are tremendously important for our university and for others. But the students also talked about not everyone knows they have and has access to those, right? If they're not in the One Gen U program or the VIP at DU, they may not know those opportunities exist. So communication, we talked about, and making sure they have access.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of synthesize some questions that we received previously, but that are coming up in the Padlet around staffing. And of course, I've heard it throughout the day, and anyone who's been watching television or reading their feeds, right? We know the Great Resignation, right? We know this has a particular impact in education, right? In public education. And so the question, there's a couple of ways that this question is going to be posed to you, Dr. Madero in particular. What is the school district doing to support, right? Really the crisis, right, that we are having, the strain. We know in many ways, right, that public education is like our health systems, right? You're on the front lines of, and I've talked about it, right, the multiple pandemics, right? Some are more recent, others have been going on for decades, if not centuries, right? But also, so more generally, how are we supporting our educators, right? Or what ideas do we have to get us, the educators, through both this time, but also to look towards the future? And specifically for our educators of color, right, who are seeing as well a particular impact, right, both in retention, but also leaving. And how and in what ways can you also reach out to those educators and maybe bring them back into the fold? So it's a complex question, but I think
very complex question, and I wish I had an answer, whether it was complex or simple, and I don't. It's a major challenge, right? So one thing that I was able to do, and this is definitely not a solution because it wasn't altogether celebrated, although there was a beautiful Twitter feed that I shared in terms of our educators excited about a day off, a mental health day off, that we also capitalize as a vaccination day for our 5 and older students. That's not the answer, because I got quite a bit of hate mail from parents as well. right? So, and what I'm hearing is suggestions of a 4-day, in-person work week to alleviate, and that clearly is not the answer. And I can tell you all that that's not going to happen, right? Because there's no replacement for in-person instruction. Like, can we navigate? Perhaps provost in the graduate level, right? Now, but definitely not in the primary grades. My little one is in kindergarten, and I expect her to be sitting down, with her mask on to protect her and her peers, but learning how to read in a circle with a nurturing teacher. That will never be replaced, and as far as I'm concerned. And sometimes I'm a little too rigid, but that one I'm going to remain rigid. So 4 days is not the answer. That's something that people are grappling with, and I know there's a push for that, but that's not going to be the solution. And I don't have a solution, but what I can say is that it's the crossroads are very dangerous, right? So we have to do whatever we can to make sure that our students are safe and secure, supported social, emotionally, mentally, and of course, academically. That is the charge, right? Sometimes people skip the safety piece. I never skip it. It's safe and secure, right? I think it's been heightened more than ever when it comes to the pandemic, post-pandemic. But even before that, I remember having a student, Mohammed, who we received from Yemen, who I realized that he will never become a learner if we didn't realize that he was having his own internal issues, because we had a fire drill and he was uncontrollable, right, because of what he experienced, right? So sometimes we take the safety for granted, and it's another struggle that we have in terms of some perception in DPS in terms of how we can support each other. So that is our call, right? But in order to deliver that service, which is making sure students learn and flourish, we need our educators. And if our educators are taxed and ultimately going to leave the profession, how are we going to accomplish that? So that balance is truly like impossible to solve, right? We can do little things like we have been doing in terms of the thank yous. There are other thank yous that I have in the stash, as they say. But sometimes I feel it's just tokenism, and it's really not solving the issue. What I can say is that I know that we're going to get to a place in which if we develop relationships, so maybe this is the answer. There is no answer at the moment, which is scary, right? So this can be another lost year. But perhaps in the future, if we were successful in developing articulation agreements and partnerships with institutions like DU, then we'll have a tremendous amount of new teachers and new professionals who are motivated and truly committed because they know what they're signing up for, as opposed to some who've been doing this for 30 plus years, and now we put a monkey wrench into their profession. So difficult question to answer, Doc. But I know that's the number one issue that we're trying to grapple with at the moment. And when teachers are saying that they feel like it's March and it's November, can we imagine what March is going to look like? I'm afraid to even go there, right? I'm happy, I'm thrilled once we get through the next 2 breaks.
We definitely want to be part of that solution with our teacher education program and our principal preparation program around the pipeline and employment into the district. So we think that we can be part of that solution. We have a question in the audience. Is that okay?
What I heard for that question, I wonder if it was one of the things that I answered on the tablet as well, was it sounds like there's not necessarily a plan or a strategic plan in regard to supporting educators and leaders of color at the moment. Is that what I?
Oh, so that was part of it. So in terms of what we have available, we have a tremendous amount of our HR resources in terms of counseling services and support in that sense. But beyond that, no, there isn't, right? And I don't think there's anybody who has, I guess, a strategic plan to address this. If that's the case, then we would have shared it across the nation. And I'm going to say I think it goes well beyond just our educators of color. I've had conversations throughout my journeys that everyone is struggling at this moment. So we have to acknowledge that it's heightened in certain areas, particularly in the far northeast. We've had 5 operational school closures, which I'm proud of in terms of the ratio, when other school districts in entirety have closed, and we have well over 200 schools. So 5 as a numerator to 200 plus as a denominator is pretty good in comparison to others. But all out of those five, I think four of them are in one specific region, which is the far northeast, where a lot of our, our students of color reside and attend, but also a good amount of our educators of color. So clearly, the data is staring at you in the face. But in terms of a strategic plan, no, well, no, we would have implemented it a long time ago, right?
There's no like brainstorming or any like
I-
brainstorm like
I-
projects or.
We're in deep conversation and we're taking suggestions. So, and it goes well beyond our senior leadership team. This is also a conversation with the Denver superintendents, the metro area superintendents, because a lot of us are encountering the same. But no one has the solution. And what it makes it even more difficult is that we're all in the same battle, neighboring districts, and we're also competing for the same talent. Right, so if we have someone who is willing and able, right, and who may not be enduring the burnout, then we don't want that person to go elsewhere, right? So I think it's not a local solution. I think it's a federal, national solution.
Because it's a national
Yeah.
issue.
So it's even, and if we can come up with something that may get us through a couple of months, it's not going to solve the issue, right? I think this is something that needs to come from the top, from Cardona, Secretary of Education, and well beyond money, right? Because money doesn't solve anything. I've polled enough, and then yes, a shot in the arm in terms of a retention bonus may go a long way for the holiday season in terms of gift gathering, but you're going to forget about it in a couple of weeks. I would as well. A day off is celebrated, and I'm appreciative of that, but it's not going to solve the issue either. And it comes with a major issue for me, because now I have to answer to parents who are saying you were not thoughtful. So I don't think the solution is local. I think it's it's clearly a national issue, and I think we need more than just a stimulus package as a support from the federal level.
I will say on the transition team, this is a big focus, however. Across all areas, we have 3 teams right now: student achievement, operations, and equity and excellence. And we're definitely talking about teacher support and development and staff support and development across all 3. So our goal is then to narrow priorities that move into strategic planning and resources as well. So I will say it's coming up in the data, it's coming up on our teams, and it's definitely moving forward as a priority. And then we'll get back to you, Tom, to see if we have a couple more questions. I know our time's running low.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull again some questions together, but this will go to both of you. And I guess the question becomes is, how do you lead a school district like the Denver Public School District? How do you identify priorities? How do you develop curriculums to meet the needs of such a diverse district, right? And sort of give some examples, right? Where you have students that are that are migrating from places that are experiencing genocide and war in their home country. That you have students that are, quote, not easy to love, right, in the words of Kendi. That you have parents in particular, right, that want to stop culturally affirming teaching and curriculum. So how do you balance that? How do you manage that? What's in terms of the work? I sort of imagine that here at the University of Denver, when we think about a program that we are going to grow and expand, our critical race and ethnic studies minor, which we're going to turn into a major, and we have that where we have a school that's 70% white, right, 30% non-white, in which the needs of each of those students are really different entering that type of program. So what you tell us here, I think, will also certainly inform some of the things that we're doing at the
You
University
talked
of Denver.
about that a little bit around having such diversity in the district, but being a unifier and seeing yourself as a unifier.
Yeah.
What do you think in terms of the breadth and depth of the needs in the district and how you move forward in that direction?
Yeah, tremendous need, and you touch on a few, and we can really highlight what's I guess paramount in discussion, whether it's 1619 Project, critical race theory, but I'm going to take it even deeper and into the nuances of what we have to deal with in Denver public schools. And in my journeys, I engage with a lot of the communities who may not have the access. I mentioned earlier on in my journeys that there are certain individuals who are always going to be heard because they know how to navigate the system, they know how to access, they're loud enough, sometimes obnoxious enough, right? And they will be heard, and they were heard very early in my tenure. but I made it a point to really speak to those who are not familiar, may not think they have access, or afraid to speak up because of a lot of reasons. And in those journeys, I interacted with several groups, and what I've learned is that there's a tremendous need in terms of what defines them and their culture. So I can speak about the Native American groups that I met with and how are we addressing it. And I know that we have a charter school that came about, which I really love the fact that it exists because it's meeting the needs of those students. As a system, I'm looking, I tend to be reflective as opposed to trying to abolish something that happened from the grassroots and saying, okay, what could we have done? What type of pulse did we need to have to make sure that we can have that communication come to the right folks so then we can create either a program or a school. So I think this opportunity that you're helping me with the transition team is the first step, is a great way to launch, but it's not going to solve it all. But I think for the first time, and forgive me for those who have tenure longer than this 5 months that I've been here in DPS, that I don't know if this community involvement and all-inclusive approach has been done in recent history. So the voices of those who, and the desires, whether it's curricular needs, whether it's social-emotional needs, cultural, will be part of the discussion. The transition team led by Dr. Salazar and her co-chairs will ultimately grapple with and develop priorities. So that's how I'm attempting to do it beyond this academic year via a strategic approach, which is a strategic plan. But I'm acknowledging that although it was very thorough, my listening and learning tour, I'm sure I didn't uncover every rock, right? And I know that this is being telecasted, so I want to share these specific situations and learnings through my travels, but I want to respect the confidentiality, but some of them are heart-wrenching, right? So some of them are polarizing because we have board meetings that get a little bit tense when we have folks saying, don't you dare teach my child this, right? Which are the ones that a lot of districts are struggling with, right? But I'm going well beyond CRT. I'm going well beyond 1619 and making sure that we meet the needs of those students that we serve.
We saw that in the listening and learning report, definitely around the diverse needs, the curriculum. Right? So a lot of these are coming out within the DPS community. And Dr. Acevedo, you know this better than I do, all the initiatives happening in the district currently, whether it's at a school-based level or at a district-based level to really try to address the curricular piece as well. So lots happening in the district as well. Do we have time for maybe one more question, or how are we on time?
I think we should probably wrap up.
Okay. I'd love to just end with one question because there's a lot of alumni here and a lot of alumni from the University of Denver watching. How can our alumni be of service to you?
Oh, let me, there's two groups that I think are the most influential. I guess Cheat Code 3, right? Cheat Code 3 is everywhere that I've been able to really transform the system. Whether it's a massive system like DPS, what superintendency principle is, make sure that you are able to connect with those who are living in the system. And the seniors are the ones that I leverage. So I have a superintendent's executive cabinet, which is modeled after our cabinet and executive team, and they have decision-making power, right? And meaning I had to relinquish some of my power, meaning I'm just a vote in the room. And those students have gone through the K-12 system in DPS. So I often ask them, okay, think about it in middle school, think about it in grade school, and they represent different schools, whether it's innovation, charter, and neighborhood schools. So an incredible group. That's the most important group, right? No disrespect, SLT, right? That's the most important group. The second most important group, and arguably that could be the better group, but I wouldn't say that to my seniors, is the recent alumni. So I had an incredible interaction with the Ednium group, which is a group that supports our most recent alum in DPS. And what I mentioned to them is not only do you have everything that I just mentioned, the scope of the K-12 experience, but now you have the higher ed and possibly the professional experience as well. So as long as it's not more than 5 years displaced in which you kind of might have lost and it may not be purposeful, that is the most important group that I think second to the seniors that I will have to engage with. And I say the same thing when it comes to the DU alum. right? I think if you haven't been, we have to leverage those because they're going to make your program better. And potentially those ideally will be not only your alum who's going to inform how you all shift in terms of what's necessary in your system, but also can be in tune in what the system in DPS needs, because it will be ideal if they're part of our organization as recent alums of DU. So in terms of the alum, make sure that you're not only your voice is heard, that you reach out, because you are the most invaluable group. And I would say even more so in higher ed, because you have the scope of an adult and a young professional. So I would ask you all to leverage those alumni networks if you haven't already, because I'm definitely am in DPS. And how incredible if those same folks are part of our organization, so you won't have to look far.
Yeah, the University of Denver is Denver's university, and thus we are the Denver Public Schools University as well. So we want to continue to partner and work with the Denver Public Schools and do everything we can to serve their students and their families as well. So thank you all very much for being here. I want to let Tom end with thanks from iRise, and I want to thank iRise as well for all of their support, for all of our work across our colleges, but also for our faculty, our staff, and students.
Well, just big thank you to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
I'm Tom Romero, the director of the Interdisciplinary Research Institute for the Study of Inequality. And this has just been such a great conversation. I think a really powerful day. Everything that we've been doing today, we at iRise, as you can see, it's connected to our work. It's connected to our mission to engage with the community, around these issues of inequity. We're going to take all of these ideas and all of your questions that you were submitted today. We're going to pass those on to Dr. Marrero and his team, so they have them. So continue to send in questions. We're going to come back together and we're going to figure out ways that we can continue to grow this partnership. Continue to build and sustain this ultimately, as we know, on behalf of the students, right? This is at the center and the core of the work that we do. Want to thank Provost Mary Clark for being such a tremendous leader and ally in this work here at the University of Denver. She's somewhat of a newcomer here too, but in terms of her leadership, I just really want to highlight the fact that from the second she stepped onto this campus, she has really lifted all of us up, right? She has taken us to the work that we're doing, the work that we're passionate with, and she, rather than creating roadblocks, has just said, let's do it, right? Let's do this together. And I really want to acknowledge, that type of leadership in terms of this institution and certainly the work that is so important to so many of us. I want to thank the iRise team, Dr. Sherry Coulter in particular, who just continues to make us at iRise and the University of Denver look so good in all that we do. Linda Duran, Karis Fox, and Michaela Parker as well, our tremendous student team and student workers. The partnership with the Chancellor's Office, Stephanie O'Malley, Shara Good, Megan Stribling, and Gretchen Presley, who represent different parts of the Chancellor's team and office. And I want to finally just thank, as those of you that see me do this, as I always do, we have such tremendous privilege to be engaged in these conversations here at the University of Denver. And there are so many people that maintain this beautiful space, right? The maintenance crew, the service crews, Sodexo, all those people that just continue to give us the privilege to be here and to engage in these conversations. And so just give a big thank you to all of them. I know they can't hear us, but it is so important about what we do. And so we have a reception. So it's right next door. Encourage us to move over there. We have alumni that I know will be joining us as well. And just continue to engage with the University of Denver, with the Denver Public Schools, certainly with us at iRise. So let's go have some reception and festivities. So thank you.